everybody. So just a quick run through what's going to happen today. So the first 15 minutes, we're going to have some questions, pre-prepared questions for the panel, and then you'll have time to give questions to the group, probably via the chat. There's quite a few of us. And when you put your questions into the chat, can you just type the name of the person you want the question to go to? So it will be either Joe, Gail or Kerry into your question, just to make sure I can get the question to the right person. And then we'll have 10 minutes in a breakout where you'll be able to share your own ideas with each other and also just connect with each other as well, because part of the reason we're doing these sessions is the networking opportunity. So I'm the volunteer management lead here at Volunteering New Zealand. I also have some experience in helping find and implement national volunteer management systems for organisations. So it's something that's very close to my heart, but it's enough about me. I'll introduce each of our speakers. So firstly, we have the wonderful Gail Marshall. Gail, would you like to give a little wave? There she is. And what an interesting background room you have there. That's very colourful and interesting. So Gail Marshall is co-founder, trustee and matchmaker-in-chief of the Community Comms Collective, which is a 100% volunteer-run charity that matches communications volunteers with community organisations. Gail has worked in communications for more than 20 years across the non-profit, public and private sectors, and is currently head of communications for the Malahan Institute of Medical Research. Welcome, Gail. Then we have Joe. Would you like to give a little wave, Joe, guest? There she is. Joe is based in the beautiful Wanaka, very jealous, and Joe has extensive experience of leading volunteers in the event space, working as the volunteer manager on events such as Challenge Wanaka, Winter Games New Zealand, Warbirds over Wanaka, Bike Glendu, and the Motutapu. Joe has used a range of volunteer management systems, including Better Impact, Volunteer Local, and Google Forms. And finally, but not leastly, we have Kerry Buck. Little wave there, Kerry. There she is. Kerry is the volunteer coordinator for the IHC Friendship Programme in the Wellington and the Hutt Valley area. Previously, Kerry was the coordinator for a local citizens advice bureau. Kerry's current role is leading a team of volunteers, including me, who are matched in a friendship with a person with an intellectual disability. Kerry draws on her learnings from the Citizens Advice Bureau relating to sections of the communities who are facing more exclusion and challenges with things that we take for granted. And she's also a mentor in the Big Brother, Big Sister program and has been for 3 years. And Kerry uses her practical experience as a tool, bringing new volunteers into the program and supporting friendships as they grow. So welcome all three of you. Thank you so much for making the time. And thank you all of you for coming along today. So I've just got a couple of questions to start her off. So now you're using a system, go right back to before you used it. Why do you think you needed something like this in the first place? Joe, could I start with you? Why did you need a VMS or volunteer management system, Joe?
Event world, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers for a day, locations. It just became not possible to manage with just emails and contact in that way. So you can get them to fill in an online form, but then to have a proper job description, which we give to everybody. And then when things change and people want to change roles and different things, when you've got 500, 600 people on a day in one location, having something that worked a bit better than just spending all the days on emails and phones. So it became, it became a vital tool and don't really want to do the job without it.
So your processes before, you still had volunteer management in place and process and procedures, but it was quite a manual, you're saying it was quite labour intensive.
Yeah, it just feels like a waste of time when there is a solution that makes everything better for everybody.
So you wanted to streamline processes in a sense. How about you, Kerry? With your IHC role, did you have some time where you didn't have any sort of system in place? Or have you always had this?
I know before I joined this particular team, they used a different program, but I don't know if it was a true VMS program. So Better Impact came in 3 years ago, I believe. And we were very heavily paper based prior to that. And using Better Impact means that we've got less paper, easier access to statistics, which is obviously vital for funding and knowing where the programs are heading. So yeah, it's really I find it a really forward focused thing as we start working more remotely. If you've got your laptop, you've got access to all your volunteer information.
All in one place as well, rather than different spreadsheets and different systems. And Gail, with the Community Comms Collective, did you have a period of time where you didn't have anything as well? Were you just sort of...
Yeah, so we've operated for 10 years on 2 Excel spreadsheets, basically.
Oh, wow.
One for volunteers, one with details of the matches we've made, and they didn't talk to each other. And so, yeah, it was growing pains, really. We're now, managing 500 volunteers and, hundreds of matches. So, yeah, it was a case of we need this. But we've kind of needed it for a while, and it was a bit of a case of getting some money in and realising now was the time to take the opportunity to actually make it happen.
So that leads into my next question, which goes right back to how, before you even begin thinking about improving your systems and processes for volunteer management, if you want to go down the avenue of renting a system or a platform, whatever that looks like, how do you go about finding, how do you set a budget for something like this? Because I imagine all these different options, there will be different price structures. Some will be license fees, some will be user fees per user. How do you go about even beginning to ascertain some sort of budget for this sort of line of work? Gail, have you had experience in that?
Well, yes, but it's a little bit around the other way, because we basically got some money, and so we wanted to find a solution that would fit within that budget. So we were very lucky a couple of years ago. So we basically run on goodwill. We don't have many costs or expenses. But we were given a donation by the New Zealand Communications Association when it wound up in 2021, I think it was, which was about $20,000. So that was our budget, basically. Which was an interesting one, because it's in the grand scheme of volunteer management systems, it's potentially not much, but it's also quite a lot compared to some of the things we were looking at. So we actually went into it with a view of what is our need. This is the money we've got. What's out there that we could potentially look at using.
So was that more formalized? Did you have to write like a proposal or a business case?
So we actually were very lucky to have the volunteer services of a business analyst who came in and mapped our whole process. So we went out there with a sort of, initially she went this great process of story mapping our end-to-end process, and then basically putting together a database requirements document for us that we could then go out with a solutions agnostic kind of need. That we went out and we just promoted it on LinkedIn and got some, it was like a job ad, really, saying this is what we've got, what we're looking for, who can help. And that's when we got some inquiries from various providers, some who were wanting to build stuff from scratch, and first round of assessing our needs was going to cost $50,000, and then this and this. But then Walker Scott, who are a Microsoft partner, got in touch with us and said that they thought the volunteer management app that they have could work potentially for what we were looking for. So that's when we went down that path. And the beauty of that, it's an out-of-the-box solution that could be customised and fitted.
Wow.
I mean, they've given us a really nice non-profit rate, but has fitted within our budget.
So Kerry, you'll have quite a different experience, because you came into your role and there was, for 3 years, you came in, Better Impact was kind of already there. Does that create issues with the buy-in, because you weren't involved in any process for selecting or building the business requirements for it? How did you find taking on board something that was already there?
For me, I felt that it was actually an advantage having not used a different program before, because I didn't have to unlearn anything. And I understood the background of why it was implemented, what its purposes were, and it meant that a lot of information, as a new coordinator, I could see what was going on. I could instantly see how long a volunteer had been with the program, what their activity had been, where their friend and themselves were based, which are really, really hard things when you've got to go through paper files. So I could familiarise myself with the program, with the volunteers and the people we support, much easier.
Interesting. Now, Jo, did you have any experience of the sort of business case end of things to help secure a system?
At the start, my first role was with Challenge Wanaka, I don't know, 10 something years ago. Better Impact didn't exist, and they had spent a lot of money on a system being designed, like a lot, tens of thousands. And then when I did the first year and I was like, I think we can do better, that's when I started searching for what was out there. I was convinced there was a better way of doing it than spreadsheets with macros that did something, I don't know how. And then we had this tech team that would solve any issues. And I was like, ooh. So that's when then I sort of did quite a lot of research to see what we needed, what could happen. And it was about tricky to stop investing into something you've already put a lot into, and jump ship into something else is a tricky thing to get across the board. But eventually it was a no-brainer situation. So yeah.
So what I found helpful from some of my own experience, I worked for a government agency, and this was about 8 years ago, and it's really irrelevant, but the process is helpful in that I worked out the average amount of time a volunteer coordinator was using to manage and coordinate volunteers manually. Then I worked out what that dollar per hour value was, and I extrapolated it across New Zealand. We had 700 rangers. It's the Department of Conservation, by the way. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me just touching on this. Department of Conservation, 700 rangers, all of which had a piece of their job was a volunteer coordinator. And I worked out they were spending 20% of their time manually managing and coordinating volunteers. And that had a dollar value attached to it. So we could prove by investing in a platform, you could save X, it was over $1 million a year in staff time. Obviously, the number or the amount different for every organization, but the principle's helpful. If you can figure out what time you're currently spending manually managing, coordinating volunteers, and what could be more streamlined with some sort of digital process, you can work out how much time it's going to save you, and time saved has a dollar value. That's useful for business case conversations or conversations with your senior leadership team. So what I found overwhelming, let's go back to the questions now, is there's a lot of these systems on the market. When I looked back in 2015, there were over 60 in the world. How on earth do you go about finding out what's going to be useful for you? Gail, how did you, it sounded like you naturally found a good fit with Walker Scott, but how did that come about again?
Well, as I say, it was from actually starting with our own process and understanding our own needs. So looking at us in a solutions agnostic sort of space. But I think what's important as well to really understand what you need from a volunteer management system. We are not looking at having to manage shifts or engaging with volunteers, getting them to sign up fee or anything. We basically are recording volunteer details and recording matches or information about community organisations and jobs that we're doing for them, and then connecting those volunteers with it. But it's not, we've actually turned off quite a lot of the functionality in the system that we've got, because we don't need to engage with volunteers through the system, and we don't need to manage shifts or specific things like that. So it's quite specific what we need. And I think a while back when I started looking at some of the other options, it was quite a different space. In some ways, what we've got is a CRM, with bells and whistles.
So do you find, I mean, from my own perspective, I found a lot of these systems have got an enormous amount of functionality, and you pay for that, but you might only use this little bit. How do you deal with that dynamic?
Yeah, again, with us, it was quite good because the way Microsoft Dynamics is set up, they've got almost modules of things. So we didn't buy the volunteer engagement one, we've bought the volunteer management. But also, I think being really clear about what you need before you even go out to look, because if you've got that really clearly expressed, you could go out to the suppliers, providers and say, this is what we need, does what you have fit that, and let them sell it to you rather than you trying to fit in with what that works. Because, we had conversations with people who were trying to get us to save the world from, you know, developing a system for us. And it was like, no, that's not, we don't need that. We need something quite simple. One of our key values is keep it simple, and that was really important to us.
Yeah, I think sometimes some of these platforms, like you say, they do promote themselves all singing or dancing, but you don't need this big fancy stretch limousine. You want a Ford Focus, something nice and defined and reliable and trustworthy. Interesting. So did any of you go to market in a sort of tender process at all? Either yourself, Gail, or Joe, did you do that at all? No, I tend to find that's more procurement through government avenues. And that was quite a long drawn out process, but I'm hoping with not-for-profits, they can still learn from going to market and basically asking the market, who can help us? And for this amount of money, what can you do? And them coming back to you, but it's not always relevant to not-for-profits because you don't have to follow that same process. So if you know, you have an idea of what's out there, how do you go about drawing a shortlist? Do you look at your sort of business requirements, and does that help you define who the best provider might be? So you know what 20 functions that you need, and you're only going to go approach the ones that can actually meet those requirements. Is that what you would do, or any of you? Don't know how that would be the best way of doing it. So do you have your business requirements first and then you go to market, or you mentioned Gay, you did it that way, but how would you normally do that yourselves? If that makes sense.
I think I just did a lot of searching. I think is there a site called, is it Capterra or something? It comes up with all the different apps that can do it. And so I sort of scrolled down through them, went in, but it's a quick instant thing. If you don't like the look and functionality, if you can't navigate it pretty quickly, I was out straight away. So I wasn't very patient with how it rolled. And also I did spend quite a lot of time researching and just Googling and reading reviews and looking into it. So it does take time, but I didn't know I just know I wanted something better than what there was. And I didn't know anyone using anything. And that's where Volunteer Local was free at that point. So for the smaller events, that's what I used, but I knew it wasn't enough for what we needed for Challenge. And Volunteer Local were really open to suggestions that you could put towards their tech team of what you would like it to do next. And I actually haven't used it for many years, but I'd be keen to see where they're at. I know they've progressed quite a lot now from when I started with it, as will all of the systems. And that was one of the reasons for using something that constantly is learning and updating and getting better, that you know that it's just going to keep on getting better and you'll have that base start, but they'll add more and more functionality as you go.
I think it's quite important that you establish that as well with a potential provider, that they have that avenue of feedback, that you can actually voice your suggestions for functionality, which would be useful to your audience. But I think most rented systems, because they're all cloud-based, they are very agile. They're built on a system that can create a new button or move things around quite quickly. But there is a caveat to that. So the larger platforms, say for example Salesforce, they'll only make functionality changes if a certain percentage of their users request it. So it's worth establishing that with any conversations with any provider, just to make sure, because you can have a function that you think would be really helpful, but they might not implement it for you because not enough of their users want it. I just wanted to go to the other side of it about for the volunteers. Have any of you, Carrie in particular, with your volunteers through the IHC, how do you know that they're using it, that they're engaging with it? What's your experience there?
So new volunteers that come onto the programme are shown how to use it. So we get them at orientation to download the app onto the phone, show them how to do their hours, and they will start their volunteer journey with us through the application process. So to join the programme as a volunteer, you have to register on the website through the Volunteer Impact login. So it's created from day one, and that's how we communicate with new volunteers. So new volunteers have been quite successful. Older volunteers, it's more difficult. because obviously their profiles are set up, but it's not a natural habit to go into volunteer impact and record the information. New volunteers know that they can leave me a message and I'll get back to them. Those sorts of things. So I think it's really great, and I think the volunteer has much more access to information, what's going on, can get hold of me without necessarily phoning me, texting me, emailing me. I know when someone's been into their profile, so I can always go and have a look. So yeah, for new volunteers, it is definitely a very good way forward, and it's just getting over the technical difficulties for people that have not.
And it's remembering, being an IHC volunteer myself, is remembering to actually log my hours every month. You send a very helpful email to all the volunteers, but as we touched on earlier, I think in your induction, having some sort of process so they set up a reminder, so they get into the habit of doing that. And once you're used to doing it, it's super easy. It's lovely having a digital access to the IHC as well as having a physical person. It's nice to have both options. It makes it feel like the organizations are very accessible. Okay, now it's 12:27. I wanted to